out. Is permaculture, quote, destroying the planet? As someone on Reddit recently said to me, are permaculturists, quote, destroying healthy, vibrant ecologies by, quote, promoting invasive plants and, quote, again, encouraging people to destroy healthy ecosystems and forests and transform forests into food forests and so on? Well, if these things were actually happening, I'd be appalled to learn about it as a permaculture designer myself. So, today I want to get to the bottom of this and find out, is there any evidence for these claims, and what does permaculture actually say and teach about these topics? So, first, this is an interesting phenomenon here to me because to be honest, as a permaculture teacher, what I see is permaculture people are citizens who just want to, regular people who just want to do some good. A lot of times they want to have a better connection to nature. They want to make a living by doing, regenerating ecosystems and helping biodiversity and sequestering carbon and doing all sorts of positive things. There's time to wonder, with people. We're talking about people like promoting indigenous rights and sovereignty and promoting native plants generally and promoting healthier, more resilient local food production and so on. And, it's like, what do you want to do with your time? You want to do one of those things and promote one of those positive things? Or do you want to trash talk about the people doing that stuff on the internet? If you do, what does that make you? And so, to me, it's kind of about leverage. Can we critique permaculture? Yes, I critique permaculture quite a lot. If you've been following me, you know that. I critique it because I want it to be even better, and I want to help the people who are doing it do even better. But I give it a loving critique with an understanding that I'm talking to people who are generally doing a really good job of things. So if I just go around trash talking them, I think that I might end up discouraging people who actually want to do good stuff. So I don't want to discourage people who are doing good things. I want to encourage all of these great things, and I want to make them even better. Meanwhile, so you'll notice I tend to focus my big criticism on the big destructive systems that we know are driving really all the problems, like big ag and big lawn. We know that industrial agriculture is the number one cause of climate change, the number one cause of biodiversity loss, mass extinctions, deforestation, ocean dead zones, and a bunch of other problems. It's a rising factor in plastics pollution. So, what do you want to criticize? A few people trying to convert their lawns into healthy biodiverse landscapes and demonstrably dramatically increasing the biodiversity of their lawn because they're not doing it exactly perfectly the way I want? Or am I going to criticize these big systems that I know are destroying the planet? So now I think one of the reasons why this sort of thing happens is just it's a sign that the permaculture movement is being successful. We have 40 years of dramatically growing movement. It's spawned other important movements. It's spawned major research farms and all sorts of and neighborhoods and all sorts of great things. And it's taught a lot of people a lot of core concepts about creating a more just and sustainable society. And of course, this is true for any resistance movement. We could see permaculture as a resistance movement to a lot of colonialism, to big agriculture, and big lawn and all these other things. So industrial food. So we could predict that if permaculture were to become successful, it would start to get the resistance movement would inspire a younger generation, more and more people, to at a certain point, it becomes a threat to the systems it's critiquing, at which point it's just kind of hardwired into society that there begins to be a lot of feedback mechanisms that provide incentives to people to critique the resistance. and to foment division in the resistance, and to do this whole divide and conquer strategy. So as time goes on, there's going to be more of these influencers that we're finding saying these kinds of things about permaculture, who in a lot of cases are professionals as influencers. They make a living, basically, or at least are trying to, by shit-talking permaculture, because that can help them gain an audience and so on, because permaculture is becoming successful. So, I think that this is kind of the mechanism that causes a lot of this kind of critique of permaculture. And the other thing is just kind of like capitalism in general, because we have this scarcity mindset. So as resistance movement grows, when a resistance movement starts, it's wide open sea. There's nobody else who's making money doing that thing, critiquing, being the kind of activists we want, critiquing harsh destructive systems. So we want those activists doing that kind of stuff. But as the movement grows, there gets to just be more competition for that kind of thing. And so you have to either be really good at it, or you have to find a new niche, or you have to, make a living by actually doing permaculture instead of talking about it. And so it just means that there gets to be this idea of competition, like in capitalism. Everything's about competition, scarcity mindset, competition. So in order to find a space, in permaculture, we say cooperation over competition. And we always urge people to cooperate on this mission that we have. But at a certain point, it gets to be beneficial to some people to try to make their place by competing with it. And so we're just going to see more of this sort of stuff. So let's evaluate these claims, because even though I think this is what's going on, it's worth taking these claims seriously, because we care about the environment and we care about the earth, and we want to make sure that we're not actually, quote, destroying the earth. So, it's a good one. So what does permaculture actually say about this idea, this initial one we saw here, about invading healthy, vibrant ecologies? Somebody sent me this meme. I don't know who made the meme. I don't want to know. My thing is I critique ideas and I critique actions, and I don't shit talk about people and individuals unless they have power. This is that other whole leverage thing. Talk truth, speak truth to power. In activist circles going back a long time, it's considered unethical to focus on people who a lot of times are just victims. They're poor, they're impoverished, whatever. They have poor education imposed on them. So we don't try to trash talk individuals so much unless they're people who have power, because then there's a democracy mandate to talk trash about them, right? Because they're supposed to represent us. So there's a reason to have a harsher critique about people who are in power. We still want to be ethical about it, in my opinion. But we can have a harsher and personal critique. When we're talking about individuals, critique the ideas, critique the systems, leave people out of it. So is this true? Do permaculturists... Now, this is what was explained to me by the person that sent this. They said that the person arguing this was saying that permaculturists encourage people to cut down forests and to replace forests with food systems. By the way, who does that? Industrial agriculture. Industrial agriculture, we know, is the number one driver of habitat loss and deforestation. So we know who's doing that on a big scale. I don't think there's enough permaculturists, even with enough land, enough power, to even have, 0.0001% of the impact on deforestation that big ag does. So even if permaculturists were encouraging people to convert healthy forests into food forests, or other ecosystems into food forests. Somebody said that to me recently too on my own Facebook group. They said that permaculturists were encouraging people to convert healthy non-forest ecosystems into permaculture food gardens. So what does permaculture actually say about this? For anyone who knows even a tiny teensy bit about permaculture, one of the very first things that you may have heard is that permaculture has three ethics: earth care, people care, and fair share. And in the Permaculture Designer's Manual, the book that was written as the main textbook for permaculture courses by its founder, Bill Mollison. By the way, this is still taught in virtually all PDCs. It was taught in every PDC I've ever taken or been involved in or taught. It's taught by, I know for a fact, the three biggest global PDCs that get taught. So most people who take a PDC have heard this. So Bill Mollison elaborates on this idea of the first ethic of permaculture, the number one thing of permaculture, the first thing that we're supposed to consider. In permaculture, that's the idea of these ethics. We begin with the ethics. And the first ethic we begin with is earth care. The earth care, people care, fair share. But the first is earth care for a reason. Everything we do is oriented around earth care first. So the very first thing we consider in permaculture is that. And Bill Mollison elaborates on what does that mean? And he says, if we need to state a set of ethics on natural systems, then let it be thus. The first one he gives is implacable and uncompromising opposition to further disturbance of any remaining natural forests where most species are still in balance. So, anyone who even knows the very first concept in permaculture, its ethics and its very first ethic, anybody who's heard the first thing about permaculture should know that permaculture means implacable and uncompromising opposition to further disturbance of any remaining natural forests where most species are still in balance. He elaborated a lot on this because it's a big concept in permaculture. One of the most famous permaculture sayings that Bill Mollison would repeat all the time is his accent is, "Don't mess in the bush." And so, and by that, he means don't mess up healthy, functioning, intact ecosystems. It's one of the most famous things in permaculture. So the next thing here too goes on: vigorous rehabilitation of degraded and damaged natural systems to stable states. Very important concept in permaculture. And finally, the last one here: establishment of plant and animal refuges for rare or threatened species. This is from the first chapter in the Designer's Manual, so anybody who's read the first chapter of the most important book of permaculture, who's just done that little tiny bit of educating themselves on this topic, has seen this and many other citations of the same idea. This was so important to Bill Mollison that he literally repeats it over and over and over again, not just in the first chapter, but throughout the Designer's Manual and in all of his teaching that he did over the years. And it's repeated the same over and over and over again in any permaculture design course and in all of the other permaculture books, including my own books. So, does permaculture encourage people to cut down and work in healthy, intact native forests and ecosystems? No, it doesn't. Now, here's an important concept about this. So, someone else went on to say, well, it doesn't matter what permaculturists say. What matters is that, like in the meme, it says rich people who took one course. So maybe there's some rich person out there who took a PDC and then they go and cut down a forest. This person was saying. Now, the thing about that is that I can't control what rich people do with their money. If I could, I would. I mean, I would love to, but I can't. I can teach them a permaculture design course, and I can tell them that permaculture means implacable and uncompromising opposition to further disturbance of any remaining natural forest. And I can tell you for a fact that if that person took a permaculture course of any kind or studied permaculture or read a permaculture book, they had encountered this idea. So the thing about that is that rich person or whoever it is cutting down forests probably also took a biology class at some point in their life. So, but would I say that biology classes are destroying forests? Of course not. That makes no sense at all. So, the truth is that, and I have asked people to show me, is there any evidence? What's the evidence? Can you cite any ideas? And one person simply said to me, it is known. It is known. Who knows it? How do they know it? They just know it. They just know this about permaculturists. What is the evidence? Can you cite any instances of this happening? Again, I'm sure there's some idiot out there who's doing something like this and calling it permaculture. That probably happens. Just as there are people out there who took a biology class and are doing this sort of thing. And it's not the responsibility of all biology teachers that this person is doing this. That person is probably just an asshole. Okay, so next one here. Someone else said to me, well, permaculturists are known to push for invasive organisms. In fact, this comment ended up getting a lot of upvotes. So a lot of people have heard this idea. I know it comes from a few influencers in the space, as I've already mentioned. Is it true? I know there's one meme artist who's a professional meme artist, and he has like hundreds of thousands of people in his group. He says this. So this idea is coming from people. I understand why people think this. It's because there are people out there saying it. Is this true? Do permaculturists actually advocate for invasive organisms? What do permaculturists actually say? Well, we could start again with the designer's manual, the main textbook of permaculture, where Bill Mollison specifically says, that we can, when talking about plants, we can use species we need, whatever species we need or can find to use in our own settlement designs, providing they are not locally rampant or invasive. So he specifies permaculture designers should not plant invasive plants. This went on to become the basis for the official set of lessons that's taught in most PDCs today around choosing plants and invasive plants. And this is it. This is it from my book. Or my books. So, but these really come from Toby Hemingway. You can find a YouTube video where Toby talks about this and mentions the first one here. The first rule is choose natives first. So in permaculture, we choose native plants first. So all permaculture gardens will be rich in native plants. Second, only choose proven non-invasive exotics if there's not a native to do the job. For example, so that's when we choose exotics. For example, potatoes come with a unique benefit that really only potatoes can provide. So we start with natives according to permaculture. Then we only choose exotics if we don't have a native to do the job. The third, only plant unproven exotics if necessary for research. And that means, so if there's a plant that we're hearing and we don't know that it's going to be invasive locally, it means we be careful about it, right? So this is just giving us a little bit of an idea of caution. That's just being smart gardening, because if you plant a plant and you don't know it's going to be vigorous and aggressive in your garden, you better watch out. Fear your successes, because that plant might be a big pain in your butt. So don't, get to know it first. This is just being a smart gardener, and it's always been a part of permaculture. 4, don't plant known invasive plants. As we already saw, that rule became this. Now, a lot of us changed this to problematic because a lot of scientists are asking us to stop using the word invasive. A majority of scientists, actually, in one poll. So I like to follow that. I wouldn't call it a scientific consensus yet, but I would say it's a majority of scientists in the field are asking us to stop using that word, so I'm going to stop using it. And 5, of course, as we've already seen, never interfere in healthy native ecosystems. So that's what's taught in permaculture books. It was taught by Toby Hemingway, the guy who wrote the most read permaculture book of all time. It was taught by Bill Mollison. It's taught in pretty much every PDC I've ever been involved in, so I believe it's taught in most of the PINA PDCs, which Toby Hemingway was a big person in. So, that's kind of what we got there. So, and on top of that, when it comes to supporting native plants, Bill Mollison refers to native plant organizations, native plant people, people working on creating native ecosystems throughout the designer's manual as permaculturists. They're part of our movement, he says, and he asks us specifically to support them. Quote, in permaculture, this means that all of us have some part in identifying, supporting, recommending, investing in, or creating wilderness habitats and species refuges. The practical way to proceed outside of the home garden, so again, he's making the point, permaculturists plant native species in our gardens and protect native habitats on all of our sites, period. In fact, the zone system, including Zone 5, where we set aside a piece for nature in all permaculture sites, Bill Mollison makes the point, this exists in all permaculture sites, period. All permaculture sites have to have a Zone 5. So all permaculture sites do this work. But he continues to say that the practical way to proceed is to form or subscribe to institutes or organizations whose aims under their legal charter are to carry out conservation activities. So, and he repeats this again throughout the designer's manual. So are permaculturists against native plant people? No. Are we against native plants? Of course not. Are we for invasive plants? Of course not. Again, maybe some guy on the internet who heard the P word once and thought it sounded cool wants to say that he hates native plants and wants to plant invasive plants. But that is not something that is taught in permaculture design courses or in any permaculture book that I'm aware of. And again, I've asked people to share with me. If you have seen something other than this, show it to me. Now, here's the thing. If this is so common that permaculture people are known to promote invasive plants, would you be able to, just provide me with one example? Maybe it's out there. Well, I haven't seen it. Maybe find it for me. Okay. Oh, look at this. This all brings us back to the idea that a permaculture garden does it all, and we want to encourage it all. We want to encourage people to create healthy ecosystems that are robust and vibrant and support native plants and have space in them for all sorts of organisms and wildlife. We want to also grow food so that we're fighting that number one cause of deforestation and habitat loss and biodiversity loss, the industrial food system. So we're doing it all. And a permaculture garden should have it all. This is my garden. And and this brings us to just kind of one last idea here, which is the question, well, do permaculturists critique invasion biology, though? Don't I hear a lot of permaculture people kind of critiquing the concept of invasion and invasive plants and some of the rhetoric of invasion biologists? The answer to that is no. Actually, no. And the reason why I say this is that permaculture is not a science. Permaculture does not really have a mechanism for making that kind of critique. Permaculture is a system of design that helps people design landscapes. So as we've already seen, the mechanisms in permaculture for discussing this isn't science and making a study about something. Scientists do that, not permaculturists. The permaculture approach are those sets of rules, helpful things, advice to people for how to have a better landscape. That's what permaculture does. So when we see these critiques in permaculture, they actually come from scientists. So there's in fact, as I was just saying, a majority of polled scientists on this topic critiqued the idea of invasion biology itself. You could look at Mark Davis's great textbook on invasion biology, the first and widely read textbook on invasion biology, where he recommends to end the field of invasion biology based on the idea that its fundamental premises are very flawed and not supported by scientific evidence. He joins a large number of scientists, again, including a majority in that poll, that say that we should retire the term invasive species altogether, and at least invasive plants. There's research to show that not one, even though very commonly some scientists, some activists, I should say, have claimed that invasive plants are the number 2 cause of extinctions, which is, there's no science behind that, as Mark Davis points out in his textbook. And it's very controversial. And so at the very least, in the term invasive plants is very controversial. So there's also now an emerging body of best practices for how we can deal with them in better ways. And that doesn't mean we throw up our hands and say, oh, let's all plant invasives. As I was just saying, permaculture specifically recommends not to plant invasive plants. But what it does mean is that when we have them, we might choose more research-based, modern, effective approaches for dealing with them, rather than just calling them names and shouting, exterminate. So instead, we're looking at research-based methods from scientists again. For example, to give just one, garlic mustard. For a long time, when garlic mustard was kind of the poster child for invasive plants in a lot of areas, a lot of regions, a lot of people who went to school, a university, and were in a science program at all, went in their program on garlic mustard pulls, as I did. So it's a really super common plant. Well, that used to be the approach. Demonize it, spray it, pull it. But now we've got like 5 research teams from 5 states, including Bernd Blasi from Cornell. We've got a team out of MSU in Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana. All of these research teams all have concluded that the best management practice for garlic mustard is non-intervention, because the species declines over time naturally, and they've found that there's no evidence of harm to biodiversity, and that when we do the old-fashioned invasives management paradigm of eradicate that thing, it just doesn't work. And often it causes more damage to the ecosystem than just letting the plant go, since we can't document any damage that the plant does. So all of those researchers are saying very openly, and you can Google that, that non-intervention is the best research-based management practice for garlic mustard. So when a permaculturist says that, that's not a permaculturist promoting or being an apologist for a native plant or invasive plant. That is a permaculturist citing, quoting scientists on what the best research-based management practice is for garlic mustard. And that applies to a whole lot of plants that get debated these days in the space. Again, what's the evidence here? And at its best, that's what permaculturists do. Permaculturists look to science to find out what works, what doesn't, and what we should be promoting. And that's what all of you guys who are permaculturists should be doing too, is we should be asking what are the best management practices on this and that, and that's what we should be promoting. So are permaculturists destroying the planet with all of our invasive plants and promoting chopping down forests and so on? I think there's very little evidence to support that claim. It seems like an extreme claim given the tiny amount of number of permaculturists compared to all of the rest of humanity there is. And especially given compared to the amount of land that just like Bill Gates alone owns. And especially given the fact that what permaculturists are doing is largely converting monocultures of lawn into healthy, diverse ecosystems that are loaded with plants and biodiversity, which all of the scientists are saying is a benefit to the planet, period.